Think about it. In today's world, everything's connected, right? And being able to read, understand English is just, well, fundamental.
Absolutely fundamental. It's everywhere.
Yeah, and it's something you hear debated publicly, plus the research, it keeps showing how critical it is for, communicating across borders. So this whole thing led us to look into a really fascinating area, how Bachelor of Business Administration students, BBA students in Thailand, are actually handling the development of these English reading skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've really immersed ourselves in some quite insightful research. It breaks down the specific hurdles these students are up against.
Right.
And also the different ways people are thinking about helping them get stronger as English readers.
So consider this your kind of fast track, to getting your head around a pretty complex educational situation.
Yeah, and maybe uncovering some unexpected things along the way, insights that could be relevant for anyone, really, who's learning or using English for work or study.
Our mission today, then, is to pull out the really core insights from all this research we've looked at. We want to get a sense of the current level of English reading skills among these Thai BBA students.
And pinpoint the main difficulties they run into. Are there common problems, that sort of thing?
Exactly. And explore the reading strategies people are looking at and, well, ultimately, talk about potential ways forward.
We've definitely sifted through quite a bit of information to bring you the key takeaways.
Okay, so let's start with the bigger picture, the context in Thailand.
Right. So Thailand, like a lot of countries, sees that universities have a massive role in improving the whole education system, especially now with globalization.
Makes sense. And policies are changing to reflect that.
Yeah, educational policies have been adapting, trying to catch up with this growing importance.
But here's the kicker, right? Despite all these efforts, a lot of Thai BBA students, well, they don't really have the English reading skills they actually need.
And that puts them at a real disadvantage, a significant one, especially when it comes to dealing with academic materials in English.
And it's not just about hitting the books, is it?
Not at all. For BBA students specifically, strong English reading is, well, it's absolutely vital for just surviving in today's global market.
You mean like reading industry reports and things?
Yeah, accessing info from international business journals, understanding marketing stuff, keeping up with travel, finance. All these areas lean heavily on English. It's where you see the real-world crunch.
Definitely. And the research also flags that English proficiency is just becoming a basic requirement more and more, isn't it? For higher ed, for jobs.
Globally, yes. Companies, they need people who can function effectively in English if they want to compete internationally.
And it's interesting because I think the research mentioned Thai students usually start English around 6th grade.
That's right. But despite that early start, the overall proficiency levels often end up being, well, less than satisfactory. Room for improvement, let's say.
Okay, so that leads us nicely into the specific challenges. What are these students actually up against?
Well, one of the first things is just how diverse the students are within the BBA programs themselves.
How so?
You've got native Thai speakers, but their English levels can be all over the place. Then you have non-native Thai speakers who might actually have a better handle on the language, especially business terms.
Ah, okay. So in the same class, you've got this huge range of understanding.
Exactly. Especially in those first-year courses. It creates a real spectrum of comprehension, and that's a tough thing for instructors to handle right at the start.
I can imagine. And what about the language itself? Vocabulary often comes up.
Oh, massively. That seems to be maybe the biggest obstacle. So many students just don't have the vocabulary they need for these English texts.
Which makes just decoding sentences a struggle.
A huge struggle, even if they try to translate word by word. And interestingly, the research points out that even when some English business words look like Thai words, it doesn't mean they really grasp the concept behind it.
Right. Those false friends, linguistically speaking. Tricky stuff.
Very. And another key challenge is reading techniques. Actual strategies.
You mean things like skimming?
Yes, skimming to get the gist quickly and scanning, finding specific bits of information. The research suggests students really struggle with these, and they're crucial skills for efficiently working through academic reading.
There was something about the history, too, a period where English teaching wasn't maybe as focused.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Apparently, there was a significant stretch. One source mentioned something like 19 years, where formal English instruction wasn't given the same emphasis.
Wow, 19 years.
Yeah, and the knock-on effect is that employers now find themselves having to do more of the English language preparation for new hires, because it wasn't maybe covered as thoroughly in formal schooling back then.
That historical context really does highlight why effective teaching now is so important.
Absolutely. And the research also brings up something quite poignant. The frustration students feel when they're in environments with poor resources.
You mean they're putting in the effort,
But the environment isn't supporting them. Bad resources, maybe outdated teaching,
yeah.
and they feel like all their effort is just wasted.
Yeah.
It can be really discouraging.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we have these challenges, vocabulary techniques, maybe some historical baggage, resource issues. How are reading skills actually measured in Thailand then? You mentioned standardized tests being important globally.
Right. In a globalized world, you need reliable ways to compare skills. The sources mentioned big international tests, like TOEFL.
The test of English as a foreign language? Pretty well known.
Very well known. But they also mentioned drawbacks. It can be expensive, not always easy to access everywhere, and even some questions about consistency. Different versions, tight time limits impacting reliability.
Okay, so what about local options? Are there Thai-specific tests?
Yes, the research talks about the English proficiency test in Thailand, the EPT. That sounds like it's probably more widely used locally.
And presumably more affordable?
Generally, yes. It's used for civil service exams, private sector jobs, too. Relatively inexpensive, so more accessible for many.
But I sense a but.
Well, yeah. The research does raise some questions about its validity and reliability, specifically how well it actually measures those deeper reading comprehension skills needed for, say, university study.
Okay. And then there was another one mentioned at Kasetsart University.
Ah, yes, the GRT, the General Reading Test at KU. That seems more targeted, specifically for their BBA applicants.
So more relevant to business studies.
Potentially, yes. It seems to allocate a more reasonable amount of time just for the reading comprehension part compared to the EPT.
And the EPT includes other things.
Yeah, the EPT has broader general knowledge questions, which might be less familiar territory for some Thai test takers, whereas the GRT tries to be a more direct measure of reading skills relevant for business. So you see these different assessment philosophies at play.
Right. Different tools for different, or perhaps overlapping purposes. Okay, so we've got the challenges, the assessments. But what about the actual process of reading and understanding? It's obviously more than just knowing words.
Oh, absolutely. Reading is such an active skill when you're learning a foreign language. And learners often do make good progress here, but it really takes sustained effort.
And comprehension isn't just automatic if you know the words.
Not at all.
Duh.
It's hugely influenced by what the reader already knows, their background knowledge, and how familiar they are with the topic. If you're reading about something you already know a bit about, it's so much easier to understand.
That makes total sense. Prior knowledge is key. The research also mentioned individual things, right? Like cognitive ability, academic background, even your mood.
Yes, it's a whole mix of factors. Your general intelligence, your schooling history, your overall English level, and yeah, even your emotional state when you sit down to read. It all feeds into comprehension.
It's complex.
It really is. And the research makes this useful distinction between, let's say, lower level and higher level readers.
How do they differ?
Well, the lower level readers tend to focus really tightly on understanding sentence by sentence. They might miss the bigger picture, how ideas connect, and sometimes just end up echoing the text rather than truly integrating it.
Okay, so very literal, maybe?
Kind of. Whereas higher level readers, they're more globally aware. They're thinking about the whole text, setting goals for why they're reading, actively pulling in their prior knowledge, and they even understand things like text type. Is this an argument, an explanation, etc.?
So different strategies, different awareness levels.
But definitely distinct approaches to processing the information.
So it sounds like while people knew Thai students generally had comprehension issues, maybe there wasn't enough focus on how they were actually reading, the specific strategies.
That's a really key point from this research. It seems there was a gap there. So this study really aimed to dig into those specific reading strategies BBA students use.
And how do they do that?
They use what's called a mixed method approach. So, questionnaires to get broad data from lots of students, but then also more in-depth stuff like think-aloud protocols.
Where students talk through their thoughts while reading.
Exactly. Plus follow-up interviews. And they did this with a pretty decent number of students, 240 from different universities, so trying to get a richer picture.
And what did they find? How are these students approaching reading?
Well, the findings suggest students generally use reading strategies quite a lot, which is good. But there's a noticeable emphasis on language-based strategies.
Meaning things like looking up words, analyzing grammar.
Precisely. and less emphasis on what they call global strategies, the higher level skills, like planning how you're going to read something or checking your own understanding as you go along.
But their overall comprehension was okay.
Moderately good was the finding. So using strategies, but maybe favoring certain types over others.
Interesting. Were there specific strategies that actually seemed to help comprehension more than others?
Yes, definitely. Certain things showed a positive link to better understanding. They mentioned insightful reading. Being familiar with test formats helped.
Okay.
Being able to read quickly but flexibly, analyzing text structure, and fast scanning for specifics, those seemed beneficial.
And things that didn't seem to help much.
Yeah, things like watching related videos before reading, or just guessing vocabulary meanings without much context, those didn't seem to correlate with better comprehension in this study.
And the type of reading mattered too.
Yes, they found a link between the kind of English text students were reading and the strategies they tended to pick.
It really does circle back to making sure students understand why reading is important, doesn't it? Beyond just being a subject they have to pass.
Exactly that. The theory discussed really highlights how vital early motivation from parents can be, and then the need for schools to systematically teach both word-to-text skills decoding and comprehension strategies. Building that solid foundation of both skill and sort of appreciation.
Which naturally brings us to student attitudes about reading. Their mindset must play a huge role.
Oh, absolutely huge. Reading attitude, basically how someone feels about reading, is known to be critical for academic achievement, especially in language learning.
And the research talked about different types of attitudes.
Yeah, it mentioned attitudes towards intensive reading, deep study of short texts, literary reading, and extensive reading, which is reading longer texts more broadly for pleasure or general knowledge. And that last one, extensive reading, is most relevant here.
Right. And what are the typical attitudes towards that kind of extensive, maybe more for pleasure reading?
Well, the research suggests they can be a bit negative, unfortunately. Students often see reading purely as a task to achieve a goal.
Like, I need to read this to answer these specific questions.
Exactly. They might not fully grasp the wider benefits of reading for enjoyment or just to broaden their horizons beyond what's immediately required for class. And that limited view can really hold back their overall reading development.
Yeah, that feels like a real missed opportunity because that wider reading can be so beneficial in the long run. But on the plus side, the research did note a growing interest in English reading in Thailand because of globalization.
Yes, that's a positive trend. More awareness of the need for English.
Right.
And alongside that, there's interesting work being done on reading strategies specifically for online content.
Ah, web reading. That's different again.
It is. One study aimed to develop really high-level reading skills like Level 5 proficiency specifically for retrieving information online.
And what strategies did they focus on?
Things like doing a quick general assessment of the page first, searching for specific locations, really detailed comprehension of certain parts, making inferences, predicting what might come next, and summarizing, all geared towards efficiently using online documents.
Makes sense. And what did that study find? Did it work?
Well, initially, students weren't very aware of these specific online reading skills. But the study developed a synthesized manual, a guide in Thai, and found it was effective. Students started adopting these strategies.
Okay, good.
But interestingly, they performed much better on tasks requiring detailed comprehension of specific sections online compared to tasks needing inference or prediction. Which just highlights, again, that different reading tasks make different demands on your brain.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. Thinking about all these findings, what are the main recurring difficulties identified? And what does that tell us about how teaching should adapt?
Okay, so the consistent difficulties that keep popping up are skimming and scanning, reading for specific details, making inferences, reading between the lines, finding the main idea, and using context to guess word meanings. Those seem to be common struggles for Thai students.
And for the BBA students specifically?
They tend to comprehend best at the more basic levels, facts, main ideas, simple inferences. And strategy-wise, they seem to lean towards those indirect, top-down approaches.
Using their existing knowledge to make sense of things.
Yeah, more than the bottom-up approach of decoding word by word and building meaning from the ground up.
But the good news is that teaching can make a difference, especially with technology.
Definitely seems so. The research indicates that guided teaching that integrates tech tools can lead to significant improvements, especially in understanding things like cause and effect and synthesizing information across a text.
And students liked using the tech. Group chats, presentations.
Yeah, student feedback was positive. They found those tools effective.
Which is encouraging, right? It suggests these tech-enhanced methods could work well for other English skills, maybe even in other subjects too.
That's promising. So, based on all this, what are the concrete recommendations coming out of the research? For students, maybe.
Okay, for students, the big message is about awareness. Be aware of national policies on English, be aware of the content you're reading, be aware of your own reading problems, and actively work to enhance your skills.
Like practicing reading faster.
Yes, practicing faster reading and making better use of specific strategies they might currently overlook, like looking closely at titles before diving in or using specific search techniques. The idea is to show them these strategies are important through practice.
Okay. And for the teachers in the classroom? For teachers, it's about fostering that awareness of global competitiveness and the rise of English medium instruction. They need to provide systematic skill practice, linking it clearly to national goals.
And maybe use different teaching methods.
Right. Aligning those strategies that students might undervalue with blended teaching methods, combining online and face-to-face, and always trying to activate students' prior knowledge before introducing new reading tasks. Help them see the relevance.
Makes sense. What about the administrators, the people running the programs?
The recommendations for them include fostering a more competitive academic atmosphere, maybe encouraging more self-reflection from students on their reading. An interesting suggestion was parallel grading for reading and writing courses to show reading is just as vital.
Weighting them equally.
Yeah. And critically, facilitating professional development for teachers both pre-service and in-service, focusing on how to teach strategies effectively, understanding student needs, tailoring instruction, and really nurturing strategy use among students.
So it's a system-wide effort. That leads us to the curriculum itself and teaching approaches. How can they be enhanced?
Well, for business English curricula, the recommendation is a dual focus. Provide the necessary business information, but also systematically develop all the key language skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing, communication.
Especially given Thailand's trade outlook.
Exactly. Trade volume is expected to increase, so the demand for employees with strong English skills will only grow.
So how can reading comprehension be specifically beefed up in the curriculum?
Suggestions include modifying the design of learning materials, getting students to practice reformulating information in different ways to check understanding, really pushing extensive reading of varied materials, and even critically evaluating the usability of current textbooks.
Like, do these textbooks actually work well?
Yeah, and maybe integrating reading into academic contests, national or international, as a motivator.
And specific teaching strategies. You mentioned pre, while, and post-reading activities earlier.
Right. Pre-reading is about activating background knowledge, predicting, brainstorming, while reading could involve literal questions, finding discussion points, comparing answers. Post-reading activities follow up, but the research notes that while instructors often know teaching reading strategies is important, their actual practice might lack structure. They might not explicitly guide students on how to monitor their own strategy use effectively. There's variability and maybe a lack of awareness of the most scientifically supported methods for the while reading part.
So good intentions, but maybe inconsistent application or structure.
Potentially, yes. That seems to be an area for development.
Okay. And the research also touched on developing better resources, better reading materials.
Yes. The focus there is on creating materials with clear, standardized levels of difficulty. Materials that integrate different skills naturally. Maybe a reading passage leads into a discussion or a short writing task.
And aligned with those teaching phases.
Yeah.
Exactly. Aligned with pre, while, and post-reading activities. And this development should be driven by needs analysis, what do the students actually need, and research findings, evaluated by experts and tested in classrooms.
So a very evidence-based approach to material design.
Ideally, yes.
It definitely sounds like a complex challenge, needing action on many fronts. What about future research? Where do we go from here?
Well, the fundamental need to keep improving English reading skills in Thailand is the main takeaway. One promising avenue mentioned was the positive impact of a dedicated effective reading skills course.
That sounds useful.
Yeah, future work could look at expanding that, maybe adding more sessions, developing online components to reach more students.
And just reinforcing the importance of reading skills generally.
Absolutely. In today's world, awash with information, skills like scanning, skimming, predicting, inferring, they're not just academic skills, they're life skills. And they're crucial for second language acquisition overall. Universities really need to step up with relevant, targeted courses to tackle low proficiency. Of course, we should also touch on the limitations of the research we've been discussing. No study is perfect.
Very true. And the researchers were good about pointing these out. For instance, how participants were selected varied a bit, which could affect the results.
And it was only at 2 universities, right?
Right. A limited sample from just 2 places. Plus, one questionnaire was adapted from research done elsewhere, which might not be a perfect fit.
Other factors could be at play too, like resources at each university.
Exactly. Confounding variables like university resources weren't fully controlled for. Also, things like participation being voluntary. Anonymity might lead to some quick, perhaps less thoughtful responses. More qualitative work could help dig deeper.
And the findings are specific to that context.
Yes, focused on one region, a couple programs. So we need to be cautious about generalizing too broadly. More research across different times and settings would be valuable.
Okay. So let's try to wrap this up. Synthesizing everything we've dived into today, what are the absolute key takeaways about English reading skills for these Thai BBA students?
I think number one is just how incredibly vital these skills are. For their academic success, yes, but critically for their future careers in a globalized economy.
And number two, the challenges are multifaceted, aren't they? It's not just one thing.
No, it's language interference, it's vocabulary gaps, it's unfamiliarity with topics sometimes, or how English texts are typically structured, whole mix of things.
And third, there are strategies and assessments being explored and used, but maybe needing refinement.
Exactly. People are actively working on this, looking at different teaching approaches, assessment tools, strategy training. It's an ongoing process of figuring out what works best.
And hopefully understanding these dynamics, these challenges and efforts is useful for anyone involved in language teaching or learning. We aim to give you those concise insights.
Yeah, that was the goal, a clear picture of a complex situation.
So on that note, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. When we look at the complexities here, developing English reading skills in this specific Thai BBA context, what wider lessons can we take away? How should we think about language education, or how we even assess proficiency in this interconnected world we keep talking about?
Yeah, what assumptions do we maybe make about reading skills, especially when English is used globally?
Right. And how might research like this, looking closely at a specific group, actually challenge some of those common assumptions?
It encourages you to think about that constant interplay, doesn't it? Individual student challenges, the education system they're in, and these huge global demands, all shaping something like reading ability.
Definitely something to reflect on.